just know it's 106.
7 and
That's,
what?
I think that's Jamaica and Southfield Freeway.
Oh, okay.
I think it's just east of the Southfield Freeway.
Let me try that one.
Yeah, I just usually go pick up like patties, ginger beer.
Oh, yes, I go get the straight up. I love the snapper, the escabeche
I have to try that.
with the peppers and all that in it. And then the ting, of course. You get ting.
Yeah.
Now,
Okay,
sometimes
ready?
they all don't.
I am.
Okay, you're ready. I'm gonna bring you in.
Wait a minute, do I put all three on?
Yep. Ready?
Yes, I am.
Okay, there you go. It's on you.
Hello and welcome to Motivation Mondays with Monica Marie Jones on UrbanNationRadio.com. We have an exciting show in store for you today. Our theme or topic is Revitalization and Resurgence. And we're going to talk about how that's happening in the city of Detroit, as well as how you can make that happen for yourself, personally and professionally. And we're going to do that with our awesome guest today, Mr. Chris Jackson. Now, let me tell you a little bit about Chris, and then I'll have him tell you about himself. But I met Chris while I was out networking. So again, that tells you the power of networking, meeting people face to face and building relationships. This is a Detroit businessman. He is a commercial real estate developer. He's the managing partner of Queen Lillian Development, LLC. And he's also the managing partner of Jackson Consulting Group, LLC. Now, you may have heard about him and his work in the news with that $20 million, 63,000 square foot medical state-of-the-art office building that is in the heart of Midtown Detroit. Or you may have heard about how he's breaking ground with his companies on a $30 million, 75,000 square foot mixed-use retail professional building in the same area off of Woodward. I know that before I met him, I was driving by and I'm like, wow, look at that new building. You can just see the area coming alive, and he is helping with the revitalization and the resurgence of the city of Detroit. Now, every week when we have our guest on, we practice our ongoing business tip, which is having your 30-second elevator pitch or 30-second elevator speech. Whenever you meet someone new in business or, whatever the case may be, you want to be able to communicate who you are, what you do, how to reach you, and leave them wanting more in 30 seconds or less. We have a very short attention span, especially with all of the advancements in technology. So how can you bring someone in? So Chris Jackson, give us your 30-second elevator pitch.
Well, thanks for having me on. My pitch is this. Detroit is wide open for business. Particularly those people who are into residential development, in particular apartments. And so what I would tell anyone, or I would certainly ask people to support Queen Lillian LLC as we continue to develop Detroit, building 1-2 bedroom residential developments throughout the city. Currently Midtown is 97% occupied, and so there is a great need for residential development in Midtown Detroit.
So thank you. Now, didn't that leave you intrigued? Oh, there are business opportunities. There are ways that I can get into this, and we are going to talk a lot about that today. Now, every week, as you know, I bring on a guest that personally motivates or inspires me in some way, and I know that they will do the same for you. And again, I met Chris. We were out networking at one of my favorite networking spots, the La Casa de la Habana Cigar Bar downtown. I call that my downtown office. And we got to talking about the state of real estate in Detroit, the investment opportunities, commercial real estate, and one of my long-term goals, which is taking some of the old vacant Detroit public schools and possibly converting those into new uses such as housing. So we are going to jump right into our discussion and our conversation. I have lots of questions to ask you, but the first one, Chris, is we see in the news, we see, on social media that there are certain people buying up a whole lot of downtown Detroit, developing a whole lot of downtown and midtown Detroit, but very rarely do we see minorities doing that. And so that's why I was extremely intrigued when I met you, because you don't always see that. So Why do you think there aren't more minorities, particularly in the African American community, buying and developing real estate in Midtown and downtown? And how can we shift or change that?
Well, first, there is a challenge in the African American communities having access to capital. In order to do land acquisition, buying properties, be it dilapidated properties that you want to bring back, you need to be able to have a certain amount of capital for that land acquisition. And so that has been a hindrance within our community. I think we're not short on ideas, we're not short on energy, we're not short on trying to be innovative, but we are short on having that capital to get started. So one of the things that I suggest to people is that you can't always do it by yourself. And so a lot of times, it's about the unity or coming together and that cooperative economics, where you have maybe 2 or 3 people who may have a smaller amount of capital, not enough to do one project on their own, but they come together, pool their resources together, and collaborate. And so I've always been one to be very supportive of partnerships. Currently, my partner in Queen Lillian is Jim Jenkins, and Jim was one of the largest African American contractors in the Midwest, largest African American contractor in Michigan. I went to Jim as I had some ideas as far as some commercial real estate development, and went to him to say, let's partner on some of these opportunities. Another former partner of mine was Don Davis, who's the chair of First Independence Bank. I identified a partner, one who owns a bank, and so who has capital. And so I brought my own capital to the table, but by collaborating, one, we were able to be able to do something larger. We had, now we can set our sights on a bigger project. And so I always suggest to people, don't feel as if you have to bite it all off yourself, and that, look to partner and collaborate with other business people.
And that is definitely a barrier that I came up against. I have this crazy faith sometimes, and I dove head first into real estate, and I was trying to use all my own money. And what I learned is that it's so important to not only go into with a partner, but the right partners, and also to build a team. Once I began to build a team and bring in help in people who were stronger in areas where I may not have been, that's when I began to feel the success. So while we're on that, what I've learned is that, the people I surround myself with, the people I spend time with, the people I do business with really matters. So I noticed in my research on you that one of the things that you really attribute to your success is mentors. So can you speak to us and to the audience about the power of having mentors?
Well, I think it's just so key. Going back in my career, and not rehashing, my career, and wasting, your viewers' time, but my sort of first strategic mentor, if you will, or that mentor that gave me not only sort of some of the business prowess, but also just understanding just sort of the community in itself, was my aunt. And her name is Juanita Jackson, and she owned Juanita's Lounge.
Hey.
Juanita's Lounge was on Schaefer and 6 Mile. And so here was an African American woman running a business, but she ran the business and had a certain level of interaction with the community that made her business successful. She later went on to be actually one of the owners of Baker's, and they still now have a sign, Juanita's Kitchen, on the side of the building, even though she and her partner, John, no longer own Baker's. But Juanita's Lounge was just an iconic place on Schaefer. But she taught me business, how to customer service, how to interact with people. Another mentor of mine was Gil Hill, who was president of Detroit City Council. I worked for Gil for 8 years. I was his chief of staff. And Gil, he taught me, again, how he was not necessarily a business person, but he was a community person, and how to give back, how to be engaged. And so Gil was a person who, I learned so many skill sets from how to interact with people, how to give back to the community. And then as I transitioned into business, I've been very fortunate in that Don Davis from First Independence Bank, was a business partner of mine. Actually, Queen Lillian is a byproduct of his mother's name and my mother's name. His mother was Queen and my mother is Lillian.
Okay.
And so that
I was
was
wondering how
where
that came
the
about.
Queen Lillian name came from. So Don was a tremendous mentor. We owned a ATM machine business together. We actually created Queen Lillian and got into development together. And then as I've transitioned and actually moved on in business, Jim Jenkins now is my partner in Queen Lillian. When I was in the casino business, Don Barton was a partner in Greektown Casino. I was one of the founding partners of Greektown Casino, and Don was a mentor of mine. He was the most substantial African American in the gaming business.
Yeah.
So I just been tremendously fortunate and blessed to have these men and women, in my family, or I mean in my life, that have just really I've taken nuggets from and been able to lean on, get advice from, and help me to grow as a business person.
Now, a very key thing came out of what you just said for me, and that's community. A lot of times when we're in business, we think get money, get money, get money, right? I want to make money. And yes, that's a part of it. But I don't think sometimes we realize the importance and the power of giving back and community service. And, one of the things I taught my students when I worked directly with youth, and some of them are watching now, they're all grown up, is that, volunteer, give back. And I don't know if people realize that's one of the important components of success. I like to say lift as you climb. So talk a little bit more about how crucial it is to be about community and to give back when it comes to, building your business, building your brand, and being successful financially as well.
Well, I'm a very spiritual person, and certainly in the Bible talks about giving, and it'll be given back to you, pressed down, good measure, shaken together. It'll be running over in your lap. And so certainly the good word, there's some truth to that. And so I always believe that, by giving, certainly it will come back to me in one form or another. And it may not always be financial. And so I've always stayed engaged in the community, been on the board of Charles Wright Museum of African American History, served on that board for about 7 years. We raised a lot of money and raised the awareness of our culture in our community. I sit on my neighborhood association board because that's where I live. And if you want your community to be better, we can't always just complain about, the grass not being cut or, something's not going right. Well, you have to get involved and get engaged. And so, I've done mentoring myself. I'm very involved in the Kappa Alpha Psi fraternity, and we have a program called Guide Right. And our Kappa League program, we take high school young men, and it's a leadership development program. They start in 9th grade all the way through 12th grade. They do community service. They have fun. They learn how to become men. And so that's something that I get a lot out of personally. Just seeing these young men grow and helping to nurture them as they try to seek their goals. So I think, every aspect of your life, we always should try to give back. I want to be an example. I have 2 sons, one 13 and 15, and, I always tell them that they should, aspire to, give back and be part of and engaged in their community.
And it's so important. I have a soft spot in my heart for the young men because one, that's who I was always drawn to when I worked with youth, because people always said, oh, forget about him, he's a loser, don't spend your time. So I'm like, those are the ones I want to work with. But also, as I see my neighborhood deteriorating, and I've had a lot of like vandalism and theft with some of my investment properties, and it's like young men, and I'm like, oh man, what can we do to engage them so that doesn't have to be an option for them? So that brings me to another question. We see downtown, we see midtown transforming. I mean, there was a time when it was a ghost town. Now it's just like all the way live. So much going on. Beautiful developments such as the ones that you're working on. But simultaneously, I'm seeing my neighborhood deteriorating. I mean, they're the vacant schools. They're pulling out the windows just to get the metal for the frames. I mean, they even climbed on the roof to take the steeple because it was made of metal. And I'm like, how did y'all get up there, first of all? But how do we take that same growth and that same investment to improve the actual neighborhoods?
Well, and that's been sort of the big argument that you hear here lately, in that everyone is saying all the development is taking place downtown and in Midtown. And as business people, the argument is that, well, it's too late. We can't get in on the ground floor because downtown and Midtown is pretty much saturated. And then two, when is that development going to spread out? When is it going to hit our neighborhoods where we live? And we're the majority of lifelong Detroiters and African Americans, and we want our neighborhoods to be like a downtown and Midtown. So, I'll sort of take that in two pieces. One, for those people who are potential developers and who want to get in on the ground floor, one of the signs you should always look at as far as an area ripe for development is when government goes in and they start to do infrastructure. When you start seeing infrastructure construction and infrastructure work being done, and infrastructure is new sidewalks, new sewer lines, new light poles, all the things that are more sort of these aesthetic type things that you don't really look at or see every day. But when you start seeing those streets being torn up and new sewer lines being put in, new sidewalks being put in.
I do see DTE doing things in my area a lot, and I don't think they're just cutting off people's electricity.
And so that is a cue for you, that because the infrastructure for any major developer or development to be able to take place, the infrastructure has to be put in first. And then you will see, as infrastructure has been put in place, so going back almost 15 years, when Dennis Archer was actually mayor of Detroit, there was a lot of infrastructure being put into Brush Park. There was a lot of infrastructure being put into Midtown. Back then, no one, you really didn't see the development above the ground. There was a lot of things going on underneath. And so as you start looking at certain communities and you start seeing that infrastructure going in, that's a good cue that is a place to start to try to invest in. Now, on the other side, it relates from a community perspective, and when does that development get to my neighborhood? I mean, it's coming. Just 2 weeks ago, an announcement for a new Myers on the far west side at the old Redford High School site.
Yeah, I was just talking about that. My brother went to Redford.
That is, and so there again, if you look at that area, there's new infrastructure that's been going into that area over the last couple of years. And so they have just actually broken ground on that. And so that area, that's going to be a huge anchor for residential development, for other commercial development. And so that is sort of in the heart of the neighborhood. I think you'll see something very similar on the far east side, over in Warren Connor neighborhood, East English Village. It's a reason why the mayor and the president of the city council, they're focusing on these auctions for these homes.
Yes.
And you look at the areas where they're doing the auctions, East English Village, they're doing the Boston Edison community,
on the website yesterday looking at that.
Maybe some Indian Village. And so as you start to follow these trends of where infrastructure is going in, where they're doing sort of these major projects that become anchors for those communities, then you start to see, those are the areas that are ripe. So I think now, because Midtown is saturated to some extent, developers are reaching out. I think that the 7 Mile Illinois corridor, there's about to be a lot of development in that area.
Yes.
Rosedale Park, of course, and then going further west where the new Myers is, there's still more development taking place where the Myers at 8 Mile and Woodward.
Yeah, my office is right by there, and I see it. It's like, whoa,
And now there's another development group with Magic Johnson, who was selected as developer for the Old State Fair.
Yeah, I heard about that.
So all of these things are, these are cues, and the development is coming to the neighborhood.
Well, my friends, you are getting some nuggets of wisdom here. So if you are interested in business or real estate or community, you definitely want to stay tuned. Go get a notebook because you want to take notes. You are getting some valuable gems right here. And go and tell 22 friends that they need to listen to urbannationradio.com right now. You can also call in with questions at 313 867-1305 or 313-867-1306. We're going to go to a commercial break, but when we come back, we're going to talk more business and development and finance and motivation with Chris Jackson.